I was 12 years old the first time I realized that being home alone wasn't the freedom I thought it would be. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late October, and both my parents had to work late. My mom called around 3 to tell me she wouldn't be home until 7, maybe 8. She asked if I'd be okay by myself for a few hours. I remember feeling excited, like this was some kind of test I wanted to pass. I told her I'd be fine, that I wasn't a little kid anymore. She made me promise to keep the doors locked and not to answer for anyone. I promised and hung up and immediately felt like the man of the house. The first hour was perfect. I made myself a sandwich, watched whatever I wanted on TV, sat however I wanted on the couch. Around 4:30, I heard a knock at the front door. I got up and looked through the peephole, but no one was there. I figured it was maybe a package delivery or someone at the wrong house. I went back to the couch and turned the volume up a little. 10 minutes later, another knock. This time I walked to the door faster, thinking I'd catch whoever it was. I looked through the peephole again. Nothing. I stood there for a second, confused. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not walking away from the door. Walking across our front porch, slowly, from one end to the other. Our porch was old wood, and it creaked with every step. I could hear each footstep clearly, like someone was pacing back and forth right outside. Then the footsteps stopped. I kept my eye pressed to the peephole, barely breathing. For maybe 30 seconds, there was nothing. Then a shadow moved across the peephole. Someone had walked directly in front of the door, blocking the light. I backed away from the door and just stood there in our entryway, staring. The doorknob started to turn, slowly, just a little bit at first, like someone was testing it. Then it turned harder, all the way, but the door didn't open because I'd locked it like my mom said. Whoever was out there tried it 3 more times. I should have yelled something. Should have said my dad was home or that I was calling the police. But I just stood there frozen, watching that doorknob twist back and forth. Then it stopped. The shadow moved away from the peephole. I heard those footsteps again, walking across the porch and down the steps. I ran to the living room window and peeked through the curtains. A man was walking down our driveway toward the street. He was wearing a dark blue jacket and jeans, nothing unusual. He looked completely normal. When he reached the sidewalk, he stopped and turned around. He looked directly at our house, directly at the window I was peeking through. Even though I knew he couldn't see me through the curtain, I felt like he was looking right into my eyes. He stood there for at least a full minute, just staring. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile like he knew something I didn't. He turned and walked down the street, hands in his pockets, like he was just out for an evening stroll. I locked every window in the house after that. I checked every closet, every room, under every bed. I turned on every light downstairs. When my mom got home at 7:45, I didn't tell her what happened. I don't know why. Maybe I thought she wouldn't believe me. Maybe I thought she'd be mad. I didn't call the police. Maybe I just wanted to prove I could handle being alone. 3 days later, our neighbor 2 houses down mentioned to my mom that someone had broken into their house on Wednesday afternoon. They'd been home but upstairs, and they heard someone walking around downstairs. By the time they came down, the person was gone. Nothing was stolen. My mom told me about it casually, like it was just neighborhood gossip. I never told her that Wednesday was the same day someone tried our door. I'm 28 now, and I still think about that man's smile. I wonder if he tried other doors on our street that day. I wonder what he would have done if I hadn't locked the door. When I was 14, my parents went to visit my grandparents for a long weekend. I begged them to let me stay home because I had a big school project due and didn't want to miss hanging out with my friends. After a lot of negotiating, they agreed, but only because my older brother Marcus was supposed to come stay with me. Marcus was 21 and in college, but he still lived pretty close by. My parents gave him $100 to babysit me for 3 nights. He showed up Friday evening, dumped his bag in the guest room, and told me he was going out with some friends, but would be back by midnight. I told him that was fine. I ordered pizza, played video games, stayed up too late. Marcus never came home that night. I didn't realize it until I woke up Saturday morning and saw his bag still sitting unopened in the guest room. I called his phone, no answer. I called again an hour later. Nothing. I wasn't worried at first because Marcus was irresponsible like that. Saturday during the day was fine. I hung out with my friend Tyler for a few hours. Came home, made food, watched TV. Around 8 p.m., I started feeling weird about being alone in the house. Not scared, just aware of it. I kept checking my phone to see if Marcus had called or texted. Nothing. I tried calling him again, and this time it went straight to voicemail. By 10 p.m., I was getting annoyed more than anything else. I decided to just go to bed and deal with it tomorrow. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas. My bedroom was at the end of the hallway, past the bathroom and my parents' room. I climbed into bed and turned off the lights, leaving just my phone screen glowing. I was scrolling through social media when I heard something downstairs. It was faint, like something being set down on the kitchen counter. I figured Marcus had finally come home. I almost called out to him to tell him what an asshole he was for disappearing, but I didn't feel like getting into it right then. I just kept scrolling on my phone. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. They were downstairs, walking from the kitchen toward the living room. Then they stopped. I waited to hear Marcus come upstairs, but he didn't. The house went completely silent. After about 5 minutes of silence, I started to think maybe I'd imagined the sounds. But then I heard them again. Footsteps. This time they were in the hallway downstairs, the one that leads to my dad's office and the basement door. I sat up in bed, listening hard. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Not the way Marcus walked. Marcus stomped around like a bear. These footsteps were careful, quiet. I got out of bed and opened my bedroom door as silently as I could. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the darkness of the first floor. I could see a faint glow, like someone had turned on the lamp in the living room. I called out, asking if that was Marcus. No response. I said his name again, louder. Still nothing. My heart started beating faster. I went back into my room and called Marcus again. This time, I heard something that made my blood turn cold. From somewhere downstairs, I heard a phone ringing. Not my phone. His phone. Marcus's ringtone. The one I'd heard 1,000 times. It was coming from inside the house. I ended the call, and the ringing stopped. I stood there trying to make sense of it. If Marcus was home, why wasn't he answering me? I called him again, and again I heard the ringing downstairs. This time I pinpointed it. It was coming from the kitchen. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, the one I hadn't used since middle school. I crept down the stairs, gripping the bat so hard my hands hurt. When I reached the bottom, I turned on every light switch I passed. The living room was empty. The hallway was empty. I walked into the kitchen, and there on the counter was Marcus's phone. Just sitting there, screen lighting up with my incoming call. His wallet was next to it. His keys were there too. Everything he would have taken with him if he'd left the house. I backed out of the kitchen, holding the bat up. I called out again, said I was calling the police if someone didn't answer. From the basement, I heard a single thump, like something heavy being set down. The basement door was closed. We always kept it closed because the basement was unfinished and creepy. I walked over to the door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear something. Breathing. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone had been running. I stepped back from the door. I didn't open it. I ran back upstairs, locked myself in my room, pushed my dresser in front of the door. I called 911 and told them someone was in my house. The operator kept me on the line, asking questions I could barely answer because I was shaking so hard. Police arrived 8 minutes later. I heard them downstairs, announcing themselves, going room to room. One of them came to my bedroom door and identified himself. I moved the dresser and let him in. He asked if I was hurt, asked where I'd heard the intruder. I told him everything about Marcus's phone, about the breathing in the basement. 3 officers went down to the basement. I waited upstairs with another officer, and those were the longest minutes of my life. When they came back up, one of them was on his radio calling for an ambulance. They found Marcus in the basement. He was alive but unconscious. There was a gash on the back of his head, blood on the concrete floor. They said it looked like he'd fallen down the basement stairs. But the basement door had been closed. If he'd fallen, who closed the door? The ambulance took him to the hospital, and he woke up 6 hours later with a concussion and 12 stitches. He said he didn't remember anything after arriving at the house Friday night. He thought he'd gone to the basement to check the breaker because a light wasn't working, but he didn't remember falling. The police investigated, but found no signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone else had been in the house. They ruled it an accident, but Marcus's phone, wallet, and keys were upstairs in the kitchen. If he'd gone to the basement Friday night, why were his things upstairs? And who was walking around the house Saturday night? Who was I hearing breathe behind the basement door? I never got answers to those questions. Marcus doesn't like to talk about it. My parents never found out the full story because I didn't want Marcus to get in trouble for leaving me alone. But I know someone else was in that house with me, and I think they're the reason Marcus ended up at the bottom of those stairs. I was 11 when this happened, and it's the reason I still sleep with my closet door closed. My dad traveled for work a lot, usually a few days at a time. My mom worked as a nurse and sometimes pulled double shifts at the hospital. There were nights when she wouldn't get home until 3 or 4 in the morning. On those nights, I was technically alone, but I had my mom's cell number and our neighbor's number, and I knew how to call 911. She always called me before bed to make sure I was okay. This particular night was in February, a school night. My mom had called at 9 to say goodnight and told me to make sure all the doors were locked. I did my usual check, locked the front door, locked the back door, made sure the garage was closed. I went upstairs, got ready for bed, and climbed under my covers. I had a nightlight in my room because even at 11, I didn't like complete darkness. My room was pretty small, just my bed, a dresser, and a closet. The closet had one of those sliding doors that never quite closed all the way. There was always a gap of a few inches, and I could see into the darkness inside. I usually just threw a blanket or a shirt over the opening so I wouldn't have to look at it. That night, I forgot. I was almost asleep when I heard it. A shuffling sound, like fabric rubbing against fabric. It was coming from inside my closet. I opened my eyes and stared at the dark gap in the closet door. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard it again. Definitely movement. Something shifting inside the closet. I told myself it was just my clothes hanging weird, maybe sliding off a hanger. But the sound came again, and this time it was followed by a soft thump, like someone had bumped into the wall inside the closet. I sat up in bed, staring at that dark opening. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, but then I saw it. The closet door moved just an inch. It slid open a little bit more, widening the gap. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I watched as the door slid open another inch. Then it stopped. For what felt like forever, nothing happened. Then I saw a hand, pale fingers curling around the edge of the door from inside the closet. I screamed. I screamed so loud my throat hurt, and I threw myself out of bed and ran out of my room. I ran down the hallway into my mom's room and slammed the door behind me. I locked it and stood there shaking, listening. The house was silent. I pulled out my mom's phone from her nightstand and called her. She answered on the second ring, asking what was wrong. I was crying so hard I could barely talk, but I managed to tell her someone was in my closet. She asked if I was sure, asked if maybe I'd had a nightmare. I told her I saw a hand. I saw fingers. She told me to stay in her room with the door locked, as she was leaving the hospital right now. She said she'd be home in 20 minutes, and she was calling the police. I sat on her bed with the phone in my hand, lights on, staring at the door. Every little sound the house made sent a jolt through me. Police arrived before my mom did. I heard them downstairs, heard them calling out that they were police. I unlocked the door and met them in the hallway. 2 officers, both men, asked me which room was mine. I pointed, and they went inside with their flashlights out. I stood in the hallway, watching as they checked under my bed, checked behind my dresser. Then one of them slid open my closet door. He shined his flashlight inside, moving clothes aside. He looked for a long time. Then he turned to me and said there was nobody in there. I told him I knew what I saw. He asked if maybe I'd seen shadows from the nightlight, if maybe I'd been half asleep. The other officer was looking at my window. He checked the lock, checked the screen outside. Both were secure. My mom got home a few minutes later and came upstairs. She hugged me and asked the officers if they found anything. They said no. No signs of entry. No evidence anyone had been in the house. They suggested maybe I'd had a very vivid dream. My mom thanked them, and they left. She asked me to tell her exactly what I saw. I described the hand, the fingers, the way the closet door had moved. She listened, and I could see she wanted to believe me, but she was tired and confused. She said we'd talk about it in the morning, and that I could sleep in her bed that night. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, my mom went into my room to grab my school clothes from the closet. She called my name in a weird voice. I went to my room, and she was standing in front of the open closet. She pointed down at the floor inside. There, in the dust on the closet floor, were footprints, not shoe prints, bare footprints. Small, like a woman's or a teenager's. They were facing outward, toward the door, like someone had been standing in there, looking out. My mom stared at them for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone and took pictures. She called the police back, and they came out again. This time, they took it seriously. They dusted for fingerprints, took photos, asked more questions. They found partial prints on the inside of the closet door handle. The prints didn't match me or my mom. They checked the window again and found scratches on the frame outside, like it had been pried open and then closed again. Someone had been in my closet. Someone had been standing in there, watching me sleep. And when I woke up, they were still in there. We never found out who it was. The fingerprints didn't match anyone in the system. There were no more break-ins on our street. My mom installed new locks, an alarm system, cameras outside. But the damage was done. I couldn't sleep in that room anymore. We switched rooms, and she took mine. Even then, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how long that person might have been in there before I woke up. Hours? Had they been watching me the whole time? What were they waiting for? What would have happened if I hadn't screamed? I'm 24 now, and I still can't have a closet in my bedroom. I keep my clothes in a dresser or on a rack, out in the open where I can see everything, because I know what it feels like to be watched in the dark. And I know I got lucky that night. I was 13, and it was spring break. My parents had planned a trip to visit my uncle in Colorado, but I got sick 2 days before we were supposed to leave. Not seriously sick, just a bad cold with a fever. My mom didn't want me flying like that, so we made a plan. My older cousin Jenny, who was 19, would come stay with me at our house while my parents and little sister went on the trip. Jenny was responsible, had her own car, and my parents trusted her. They left on a Saturday morning, and Jenny showed up an hour later with her bag. The first 2 days were great. Jenny let me stay up late. We watched movies, ate junk food, and she didn't treat me like a kid. By Tuesday, I was feeling a lot better. My fever was gone, and I was just dealing with a stuffy nose. Jenny asked if I'd be okay alone for a few hours that evening because she wanted to go see her boyfriend. I told her I was fine, that I was 13 and didn't need a babysitter anyway. She laughed and said she'd be back by 11 at the latest. She left around 7 p.m. I made myself dinner, watched TV, played on my phone. Around 9, I decided to take a shower before bed. Our bathroom upstairs had a shower with a curtain, and I always kept the curtain open when I wasn't using it because I hated the way it looked closed. I turned on the water, waited for it to get hot, and stepped in. I was washing my hair when I heard something over the sound of the water. A creak, like a floorboard. Our house was old and creaked all the time, so I didn't think much of it. I kept washing my hair. Then I heard it again, closer this time. I turned off the water to listen. Silence. I stood there dripping, listening as hard as I could. Nothing. I turned the water back on and rushed to finish my shower. I was rinsing off when I heard it clearly. Footsteps in the hallway outside the bathroom. Not creaks, actual footsteps. I froze, water running down my face. I waited, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. I hadn't locked it. I never locked it when I was home alone, because what was the point? I watched the door handle, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. For at least a minute, I stood there in the shower, water running, staring at that door handle. Then I heard the footsteps again, moving away, going down the hallway toward my bedroom. I turned off the water and stood there shivering, not from cold. I grabbed my towel and wrapped it around myself, trying not to make any noise. I crept to the bathroom door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear something, a drawer opening. Someone was in my bedroom, going through my things. I thought maybe Jenny had come home early and was putting something away for me. But her car made a loud rattling noise, and I would have heard her pull up. I quietly turned the door handle and opened it just a crack. From where I stood, I could see part of my bedroom doorway. A shadow moved across the light. Someone was definitely in there. I opened my mouth to call out, to ask if it was Jenny, but something stopped me. Some instinct that said, "Don't make a sound." I carefully stepped out of the bathroom and looked toward my room. I could see a man standing in front of my dresser. He had his back to me, and he was going through the drawers, pulling out clothes, setting them aside. He was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap. He was not Jenny. He was not anyone I knew. I backed into the bathroom as slowly and quietly as I could. I closed the door without letting it click and locked it. My phone was in my bedroom. I had no way to call for help. The only window in the bathroom was small and high up, and it led to a 2-story drop. I heard the man's footsteps coming toward the bathroom. I looked around for something, anything to defend myself with. All I had was a can of hairspray and a razor. I grabbed the hairspray. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned. The door pushed open about an inch before hitting the lock. The man tried it again, pushing harder. Then he knocked. 3 soft knocks. He said something, but his voice was muffled, and I couldn't understand. I didn't answer. I stood there in my towel, holding a can of hairspray, trying not to cry. He knocked again, harder this time. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. He said my name. He knew my name. I don't know how, but he said it clearly. He asked me to open the door. His voice was calm, almost friendly. I backed up against the wall, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. He tried the handle again, rattling it harder. Then he stopped. I heard him walk away, back down the hallway. I stood there listening, trying to figure out what he was doing. Then I heard the most terrifying sound. He was walking up and down the hallway, opening and closing doors, like he was looking for something, or looking for another way into the bathroom. I remembered there was a closet in the hallway that had an access panel to the bathroom pipes. If he found that panel, he could get in. I heard him open the closet door. I heard things being moved around. I couldn't wait anymore. I climbed onto the toilet, pushed open the small window, and punched out the screen. I squeezed myself through that window, scraping my arms and legs. I hung from the windowsill for a second, then dropped. I landed hard on the grass below, pain shooting through my ankle. I didn't care. I ran to our neighbor's house, pounding on their door. Mr. Carver answered, looking shocked at this wet, towel-wrapped teenager on his porch. I told him someone was in my house. He brought me inside, gave me a blanket, and called 911. Police came, surrounded my house, went in with guns drawn. They didn't find anyone, but they found evidence someone had been there. My bedroom window was open, screen removed. That's how he got in. Drawers were open. Things were moved around. And in the hallway closet, the access panel to the bathroom was pulled open. He'd been seconds away from getting in. Jenny came home to a street full of police cars. She was hysterical, apologizing over and over. My parents drove through the night to get home. They never found out who it was. But 2 weeks later, our neighbor mentioned that a man had knocked on her door a few days before the break-in. He'd asked if the family at our address was home, said he was an old friend. She told him we were out of town for the week. She described him, and it matched the man I'd seen in my room. He'd been planning it, watching our house, waiting until he knew I was alone. I'm 21 now, and I still can't take a shower if I'm home alone. And I never, ever leave a door unlocked, because I know what it's like to be hunted in your own home. And I know I only escaped because of a small bathroom window and pure luck.